So the A7S III, in my opinion, is still one of the best cameras you can buy for video in 2024. It's basically the exact same camera as the FX3, especially with the firmware updates that have come out recently that brought it up to par with Sony's newer cameras. But that being said, this camera is getting old, and hopefully we'll be seeing an A7S IV soon. Now first, let's talk about the specs of this camera. It is a 12 megapixel sensor that can shoot 4K up to 120 frames per second. It shoots 10-bit 422 internally, has dual SD and CF Express Type A cards, and can output ProRes RAW video to an external recorder like the Atomos Ninja 5. Now when you say all that on paper, that's more than enough for most people. But when you compare cameras like the Nikon Z6 III, the Canon R5 II, they also pack these incredible video features, but they also are very strong photographically. And photography is where this has been criticized since it came out. And so there are three things I think the A7S IV needs to do in order to carve its own path and stand up to the competition. Number one, increase the megapixels. I know this is the low light keying, and 12 megapixels is perfect for 4K, and that's why we're able to get the dual base ISO. But we're seeing more and more modern cameras that have more megapixels than this being able to push into those higher ISO ranges and stay relatively clean. Now, I don't want this to go to 33 like the A7 IV or really even 24. I think the sweet spot for this is 20 megapixels. The reason being, 20 megapixels is more than enough for most photography out there and will actually benefit most people because you won't have massive file sizes. But the reason 20 megapixels is also a great number is because that would be native 6K resolution. I know there's cameras out there pushing 8K, but we don't need that. Having a camera that could shoot DCI 6K in true 24 frames per second in this kind of body would be insane. This would help separate it from cameras like the FX3 and probably the new FX3 Mark II coming out. I personally don't see the FX3 Mark II getting 6K. I think they're gonna double down on having the best 4K possible while giving stuff like internal ND, 32-bit float audio. That's the kind of stuff that true cinema cameras are focused on. And when you look at the FX6 and FX9, those shoot 4K as well. Number two is the ability to record internal ProRes. And if we could get ProRes RAW, that'd be cool, but I could completely understand why that would be external only. But I believe internal ProRes should be a feature. And maybe it's not internally to the cards directly, but maybe we could plug in an SSD and record directly to that without the need for an external recorder. Cameras like the Lumix S5 IIX do this already, and it's a very beneficial video feature to have. So if we could get those kind of video abilities with the 6K recording that I've already discussed, that would be a corner of the market that not really any camera has touched yet. All right, so quick editor's note. I am fully aware that the Nikon Z6 III does shoot internal ProRes RAW. It does shoot 6K. I am aware of that. The one thing I will say is it does it, but it does it with limitations. I'm not trying to say that the Nikon Z6 III isn't a great camera. It's fantastic. I think Nikon was super close to nailing honestly a perfect camera for most people, but there are some limitations, there are some quirks. I don't have time to go over everything in this video. I highly recommend you look it up for yourself. Before I get to my third point, I want to give some honorable mentions of things that I think are kind of a given that the new camera would have to have. Things like better autofocus with the improved processing of the AI chips, better battery performance, and better heat dissipation, as well as the new and better ergonomic body style. And these are features that we're seeing in pretty much all of Sony's new cameras coming out. And the third and final thing I think needs to be brought to the A7S IV is shutter angle. Now Sony just brought this to the FX3 with a firmware update, and there's a lot of rumors that they're going to bring it to the A7S III as well, which means that if the A7S IV comes out and doesn't have shutter angle, it's going to be really missing the mark, especially when you compare it to other cameras that it will be compared to that do have shutter angle. Now it's also supposed to be a true hybrid camera, so I think that the camera should be smart enough when you switch from photo to video to switch between shutter speed and shutter angle, or at least have the option to program that. I understand some videographers out there may not even know what shutter angle is, but having the option to have shutter angle on video without worrying about having to switch it back on photo, this would make it much easier to switch between 4K 24, 4K 60, 4K 120, 6K 24, whatever recording mode you have, you could just leave the shutter angle stuck at 180 degrees and it will automatically adjust based on what your recording mode is, which allows you to record faster. And when you're doing anything that's hybrid focus photo and video, those little time savers add up. So I think adding all these features that I've spoken about would allow Sony to corner a market that really hasn't been touched in the correct way without cannibalizing the rest of their camera line. I don't think the A7S IV needs to be looked at as a cinematography first camera. I think it needs to be looked at as a video first camera. And I do think there's a difference there. People who are shooting documentaries or that are true filmmakers are probably going to lean more towards the cinema line, but that doesn't mean there's not a place for this. Wedding videographers, event videographers, concert videographers, which means although the FX3 Mark II will probably be an incredible camera, having these additional features on an A7S IV that's for pro content creators, pro videographers, honestly put Sony on top of a gold mine. Now the camera I'm filming this on right now is the A7 IV, and I'm gonna have a video coming out next week about what the A7V needs to have to be a successful camera. So if you wanna see that, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.